Hi, I'm State Senator Jose M. Serrano, representing the 29th Senate District, which covers neighborhoods in the South and West Bronx, East Harlem, Roosevelt Island, Upper Yorkville, Central Park, and the Upper West Side. I'd like to welcome everyone to this edition of Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. As I'm sure many of you know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The problem of domestic violence is one that plagues all segments of our population. But recent high-profile cases have brought increased awareness of the need for all of us to take action. Statistics show that nationwide, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience some form of domestic violence, which equates to nearly 20 people per minute being the victims of domestic violence. In addition, so much of this insidious problem goes unreported, forcing victims to suffer in silence. This episode will be dedicated to raising awareness about domestic violence and educating the public about what they can do if they find themselves or someone they know in this situation. Our aim is to shine a strong spotlight on this problem while exploring ways to combat it. So hopefully we can reduce these shocking statistics. Joining me today are 3 individuals who work day in and day out to raise awareness and combat domestic violence. Anabella Escobar is the Deputy Director of the Manhattan Family Justice Center at the Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence. Maureen Curtis is the Associate VP of the Criminal Justice Programs at Safe Horizon. Martha Howes is the Deputy Director for Programs at Violence Intervention Program. Let's start by having each of you tell us a little bit about yourselves and the organizations and the types of services you provide for the community. Anabella?
Thank you for having me here. My name is Anabella Escobar. I'm the Deputy Director of the Manhattan Family Justice Center, which is a program of the Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence. The Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence oversees the service delivery, the citywide service delivery of domestic violence, works very closely with diverse community to increase awareness about domestic violence. Also works very closely with service providers to expand access to services as well. The Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence provide direct services through 4 family justice centers, which are located in Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn. In Staten Island, we have what is called a DIVERT program, which is a domestic violence intervention team. And the Family Justice, and soon, actually in 2015, next year, we are going to be opening a Family Justice Center in Staten Island. And at the Family Justice Centers, we provide comprehensive services for victims of domestic violence, elder abuse, and sex trafficking. And this is regardless of immigration status or language spoken. In addition, the Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence also operates a New York City Healthy Relationship Academy, and that is in which we provide workshops on healthy relationship for young people, and also parents and providers as well.
That's great. Maureen?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. So I work for Safe Horizon, which is the largest victim services agency in the country. We provide a variety of services for victims of any crime in New York City. Probably about 60% of the clients that we see, and we touch the lives of more than 250,000 people every year, are victims of domestic violence. And we have programs that are in the courts, are in police precincts, are in the community. We're in the family justice centers, all 4, and when they open up in Staten Island, we'll be there. We run 50% of the domestic violence shelters. We run the New York City Domestic Violence 24-hour hotline. We also run the child advocacy centers, which are centers that work with victims of severe physical abuse and sexual abuse. We also have an anti-trafficking program and a domestic violence law project and an immigration law project. So pretty much we provide, the type of services that we provide are trauma-informed, client-centered. So no matter what the client or how the client presents to us, our goal is to meet them where they are. Our expertise is within the systems, trauma, options and services available, and then help them to develop a safety plan that addresses the risks that they've identified for us and meets their needs.
That's great. Martha?
Thank you very much for having me, for the invitation, Senator Serrano. And the Violence Intervention Program is a Latina-focused organization that aimed from 30 years ago to cover that void for victims of domestic violence of Latino heritage. It was very difficult to find appropriate services in their own language. We do serve any and everybody. We actually have West Indian clients in our shelters, and we have people from everywhere. But we focus definitely on the Latina population because it is important for victims to have services provided in their own language, especially when we have a large immigrant population that for whom actually Spanish is the second language. Most of them have their own native language, so it is very, very hard for them to communicate in English. We have our hotline is 24/7 live, so anybody who calls our hotline in English or in Spanish will definitely have a voice at the other side. We provide an array of services. We have an emergency shelter. We have a transitional housing program. We also provide services at 3 non-residential programs, one in the Manhattan area, your area, one in the Bronx, and one in Manhattan. We sit at the Family Justice Center of Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx. And we also have our emergency hotline and our community education and outreach program. Through the community education and outreach program, we aim at educating the public about issues of domestic violence and try to prevent events of domestic violence. It is a very comprehensive program. We also work with Safe Horizon, and we partner with a lot of other community organizations.
Well, that's wonderful. I appreciate all of you being here. This is not the easiest of subjects, but I think it's one that is extremely important and needs to be discussed. And before I get into some of the broader questions on domestic violence, let's start off by talking about what a person should do if they find themselves in a domestic violence situation or if they know of a close loved one who is. What should be their first step?
Okay. So if somebody is experiencing domestic violence or knows someone who's experiencing domestic violence, the first thing that they should know is that help is available. Okay, so if they're in imminent danger, they should call 911. Our family justice centers are walk-in centers, so no appointments are necessary. We're open from Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. We provide an array of services there, right? So safety planning, counseling services. We have legal services as well. We can offer legal services in terms of family law, immigration, matrimonial work as well. If they're looking for some other services like job readiness, benefits, financial literacy, they want to understand how to keep their finances. So we can offer all those services at the center as well.
That's wonderful. Maureen?
I think what Anabella said is great. I would just add to that I think what's really important, particularly if you know somebody who's a victim of domestic violence, is to recognize how not to be judgmental and not to try to understand the decisions that that person who may be a victim is making. And that can be difficult because, you know, we know that many victims of domestic violence, sometimes for their safety, choose to stay in a relationship that may be abusive. And I think it's really important, particularly if you're a friend or a family member, because so many victims of domestic violence turn to their friends or family members before they turn to any of the systems, is to recognize that it can be difficult not to judge or not to blame. But that person, if they know that you're not blaming them, is going to feel comfortable in coming back to you again.
That's such a great point, because I often hear, don't blame the victim further. Well, they'll tell the victim, well, what are you doing staying in that relationship? What's wrong with you? But it's really not what's wrong with the victim. It's what's wrong with the perpetrators. That's a very good point. Martha?
Absolutely. Both of them made very important points. The thing is, we usually don't recognize how tied this person is to the abuser, and how the abuser has shrunk the world of this person, that it's very difficult to see exit. So the most important thing is to help the person access services, because the solutions are very individual. They have to be tailored to the person. It's not one fits all solution. And a professional can help the person make the best decisions. We have to remember that the most dangerous time for a victim is when she or he plans to leave the relationship. It's the most dangerous moment. A lot of the people who died because they are leaving the relationship. So we have to remember that it is best to call a professional. Most of the time, our friends and family have very good ideas, but may not be the most safe ideas.
That's important. Well, thank you for that. The question that I want to get into now is one that I'm sure all of us deal with around this table, and that's with domestic violence within the immigrant community. I in my office do a lot of work with the immigrant community. We have a thriving immigrant community in East Harlem and the South Bronx. But one of the problems that I have encountered is that when there are issues of domestic violence, sometimes it's difficult to get folks to come forward. And that's across the board. Many in the immigrant community may be a little bit unsure of their immigration status, therefore they don't want to sort of step forward, they don't want to go to the law enforcement, not fully understanding that we live in a city where, by rule, the city agencies are not going to inquire about your immigration status. They were going to try to help you with your issue at hand. So knowing that there is an underreporting of domestic violence in the immigrant community, what can we do, or what should we do to address that issue? And I'll start with Martha, since you deal a lot with the Latino community. Definitely.
And part of what we do is to bring the information to the places where the immigrants are. We go to the South Bronx, to everywhere in the city. We even go to Staten Island, although we don't have an office there, but we go anywhere to share information with people. We have our little gadgets. We have our nail files, for example, with the number, because it's discreet, and we ask people to post the information in places like bathrooms, for example, women's bathrooms, because it's much easier for the person to look to maybe write the information or take the nail file or something that will be able to help her in the future without being obvious. And especially for our Latino population who feel this is shameful, very shameful, and also are not very comfortable with law enforcement and the courts and places like that. So being less obvious, very, very discreet. Our offices are very discreet, and that's part of what helps. For example, we received a referral from the Family Justice Center because the person was in danger so much that it would be very obvious for the abuser if she entered the Family Justice Center. So it's better for her to come to one of our offices. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of relationship that we have. We serve the victim according to their needs. So it's very good to have options.
Very good. Maureen?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I would add, because I think that while to your point there is a law that protects immigrant victims who may not have legal status, not many immigrants may know this. And when we think about tactics that a person who is abusive is using, threatening to have them deported or threatening to have them arrested or having their children taken away, can stop a person from reaching out to the systems. I would add that one of the things that I think we do very well here in New York City is VIP is a cultural-based organization, and we work very closely. Safe Horizon works very closely with cultural-based organizations because we recognize we cannot, as large as we are, we have 50 programs citywide, we can't do it alone. And reaching and partnering with agencies such as VIP make a difference because our expertise at Safe Horizon when it comes to domestic violence is an expertise in the criminal justice system and an expertise in the housing systems. Two of the main systems that victims of domestic violence turn to every day, and yet they're the most complicated systems for any victim of domestic violence. So we lend our expertise, and we're in all the family courts, and we're in 4 of the 5 criminal courts. So if a VIP colleague or another cultural-based organization has a client who's coming into court, they can come to our offices, use our reception center, and depending on the need, we may even be able to accompany them into the courtroom so that they have that support that they may need when they're in the court. And we're also in police precincts, so we can help a victim of domestic violence navigate, particularly an immigrant victim of domestic violence, navigate the police department.
That's
And we often do, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right,
wonderful.
right.
Anabella, would you like to add to that?
Sure, absolutely, I agree. And at the Family Justice Center is a one-stop shop, so we have the different agencies there as well. And just to remind that we offer services regardless of immigration status. And very important for the viewers to know is that we have immigration attorneys that can assist with any immigration matters as well.
That's great.
And I just want to add that one thing I think that's really important to know too is that we, in the communities that we serve, if we know that there is a population that speaks another language, we, to the best of our ability, make sure that we're hiring staff that speak that language and speak that language fluently, so that when a person comes into our program, we may be connecting them to an organization like VIP or referring them to the Family Justice Center, but we want to be able to, while they're with us, speak their language.
And that is a very good point, I think, but it's more than just language. And we at VIP found out that it is extremely important for people to be able to understand culture. The culture and the language are apart.
Cultural competency
yes.
is
So
very
cultural
important.
competency is extremely important, and we focus a lot on that.
Along these same lines, I do a lot of work with the LGBT community. There's been a horrible increase in violence towards the transgender community. What are some of the focuses that each of you are doing to reach out to the LGBT community, assure that community that these services are available to their domestic violence issues as well?
Sure. At the Family Justice Centers, as service providers, we understand that there are many factors that too often prevent members of the LGBTQ community for seeking services, domestic violence services. And we wanted to know that we do spend a lot of time doing outreach on the different communities, and we're committed to making sure that our staff are trained to provide services to all victims, including LGBTQ members. And we wanted to know that it is a safe environment, a welcoming environment, and also that we partner with experts, just like we partner with Safe Horizon, VIP. We also partner with ABP, which is the Anti-Violence Project, okay? And they work specifically with the LGBTQ community, so we benefit and our clients benefit from their expertise as well.
Wonderful.
And I would add, because we also, partner with AVP, and they may have come out and done training for our staff to help us to better understand specific needs. We also look at our sites to see, are they welcoming to all communities? And I think that that's really important. Because we work in police precincts, we've done joint trainings with police officers, with partners from the Anti-Violence Project. Because as we know, police officers are first responders. And here in New York City, they respond to more than 280,000 police reports every single year. And it's really important that they understand, their comfort level, so that if they're coming into a home and there's 2 men or 2 women, how do they ask, is this an intimate relationship? So they can determine, is this roommates or is this an intimate relationship, which now, requires a different response.
Martha? Absolutely.
We also partner with AVP, and it's an important partnership because most of the shelters are not equipped to serve the LGBTQ population. Ours does have one set aside, but it is joined, so it's not very accommodating. So we do partner with experts, and we reach out to others who have the capacity to serve, but it's not a gender issue. So we need to help people understand that this is not about gender, that domestic violence can exist and partner violence can exist in all the populations.
Very quickly, I know we're running short on time, but the last question I wanted to pose to all of you is, how do we get deeper? How do we get to the root of the problem? We're talking a lot about the services that you provide and what we can do for the here and now, but sort of uncovering what is the root causes of domestic violence. And for every story, I'm sure it's completely different. There is no 2 similar situations. But what effect does bullying have on, say, a child growing up? Will they be more inclined towards violence, or if they witness violence in their home as a child between their parents, will that predispose them? And again, I'm not making excuses for perpetrators of violence, but I just want to help us get a deeper understanding as to why this is happening.
Well, there is extensive research and evidence that shows that children who witness or are abused are a risk or repeating some of the patterns of violence themselves. So that's why the Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence and the Family Justice Centers is critical for us to provide services not only to the victims, but if they have children, to the children as well. We provide children's counseling and other supportive services for the entire family, for specifically the children. And that's why, and also we believe in preventive services, right? So, and through the New York City Healthy Relationship Academy, we trained, we provide workshops to young people, the parents, and also the service providers, because we believe that raising awareness and prevention and providing services to children will definitely impact, and we can begin to see some reduction on domestic violence.
I totally agree, and I think that I really believe that I think the first thing we have to do is we have to recognize how pervasive this is. It cuts across so many aspects of our lives in so many ways, and we do not have yet the societal outrage that we need to have, and we need to reach, as Anabella said, young people. We should be teaching young children as young as kindergarten, what it means to be in a healthy relationship, what it means to be violent, so that, because once you have a teenager or an adult, you're talking about trying to undo behavior that may have been learned over a lifetime, and that can be very, very difficult to do. And you just have to look at the numbers. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men. It's something that until we have that outrage where we say we're not going to sit back and watch a person threaten or harass or assault, and also recognize that domestic violence is a lot more than physical violence. You could be in a very terrifying relationship and not be hit by that person. But that person has total coercive control over you, has you isolated and manipulated and away from your family and friends so that you're living a life of terror.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly important question. Thank you for asking it, because definitely we need to not just, I agree with all of that Anabella and Maureen said, but it also, we need to recognize that violence is everywhere in our structural, our society's structure. Right. So we have, in VIP, our mission is to promote healthy relationships, not just within the family or the partnership, but also in the communities. And we're an advocacy organization, and we attempt to do that, to change the structure of power, so that power, there's nothing wrong with power, definitely, but it's how you use it. Right. And
Cultural
Maureen
norms.
described it perfectly.
Yeah.
So as long as we use power for good, and instead of domination and control, then we will have a better society and less domestic violence.
We have about 30 seconds left. Can each of you tell us how you can be reached, your websites, contacts?
Sure. So we can get. So you can contact us by calling 311. I believe my website is also showing www.nyc.gov /domestic violence. Okay, so that's a way to reach the Family Justice Center.
And our website is www.safehorizon.org. And as I mentioned earlier, we can also be reached on the 24-hour New York City hotline, which is 1-800-621-HOPE. 4673.
Again, we can be reached at 1-800-664-5880 24/7 bilingual hotline, and our website is www.vipmujeres.org.
I want to thank all of our amazing guests for joining me today and for all of their tireless work in bringing awareness to domestic violence. My office and I will be continuing the conversation and to bring awareness to this topic. Thank you once again for joining us. It was a wonderful discussion. I wish we had more time, but thank you for your continued advocacy and your work in combating domestic violence. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Represent NYC, a Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Take care and be well.